Welcome back to the channel, folks. So in today's video we're going to be talking about lenses and a recommendation for maybe your first prime lens if you're getting into photo or video in 2022. So this lens I want to talk about today won't break the bank. It's going to really help you get creative with both your photo and video, and the performance of it is fantastic. And that lens is of course the Canon 50mm 1.8 EF lens. So let's get into it. So lots of people in the past have asked me, what lens should I buy next after buying the first DSLR camera? And each and every time I've always suggested people who have bought a Canon camera should check out the EF 50mm 1.8 lens because it's so versatile, it's so cheap, and it's pin sharp. You will get fantastic images out of this, and the video is really good too. Don't need to drop thousands of pounds or dollars to get the f1.2 version, which, don't get me wrong, is a great lens. You'll get amazing results, but for just 100 quid you can buy this lens, and it is pin sharp for pictures, and it's tiny, light. Yes, it's fairly cheaply made, but what do you expect for £100? It's gonna be. But that means you can throw it about, chuck it on your camera, use it, and not worry about breaking it, because at the end of the day you can replace it for fairly cheap. And for that small amount of money, you get a lens that you can drop down to f1.8, so that means you can get more light into your sensor, which means your images will be nice and crispy clear, and your background will be nice and blurry, your subject in focus, and we all know that makes for a much more powerful image than having everything in focus, and you really want to isolate that subject that you're taking that picture of. So the low light capabilities of this thing is fantastic for any wedding shooters out there starting out. Most of the time ceremonies are very badly lit, so being able to drop this aperture down a little bit lower means you'll get more light in, like I mentioned, and you'll be able to get nicer, cleaner images. It really does make a difference, because if you've got a lens that can't go down to f1.8 and you can only go down to f4, for example, you're missing out on so much light there, and your pictures will be a little bit more grainy, and there's more chance of you missing focus as well. So the second big plus point for this lens is the size of it. I mean, it's tiny, look at it. It's really not heavy, it's not big, it's not something that's going to make you stand out. So if you want to get into street photography, for example, you could stick this onto your DSLR camera and you're not going to stick out like a sore thumb, compared to, say, the 70 to 200, which with the lens hood on, it makes it look very obvious that you are a photographer who has got some nice kit. And if you're into street photography, you really don't want to draw attention to yourself. So like I say, the size of this thing, it's tiny but very powerful. So let's dive into the specs of this thing. So like I said, it's an EF mount, so it'll fit a whole range of Canon DSLR cameras, as well as the mirrorless ones where you can use the RF to EF adapter. So you'll be able to use that on your ERSR, your R5, your R6, etc, etc. So if you are using this lens on an APS-C camera like the 80D, for example, which I did a video on last time out, which I'll link up here or here, wherever, it will be punched in a little bit to 80mm because of the 1.6 magnification that you get with using an APS-C camera, whereas on a full frame camera like the EOS R or the R5, you'll get that full 50mm view when shooting both photo and video. So if you wanted to put a filter on this lens, it's a 49mm filter, and as well as the size, it's really light. I mean, I don't know what to compare it to, but as you can see, it's light as a feather, it's small, but like I say, very powerful lens. So within this is 7 blades that make up the construction of the lens. So for anyone who doesn't know, the more blades you have within a lens, the more rounded the bokeh, however you say it, so subject will be nice and in focus, the background will be blurry, and that blurred background you'll see when you zoom into a picture be nice round circles. The more blades that you have in, the better performing lens, the more the bokeh is rounded, but usually the more expensive lens comes with that. And the final point on the specs is the sharpness of this lens. As I've mentioned, it is so sharp. If you stomp down to f2.8, you are getting some fantastically sharp images, and it will not disappoint. So let's look at when to use this lens. So for me personally, I use it for everything I shoot, whether that's product photography, sports photography, video work, like I've said, weddings, street photography, and sometimes I'll even take it out with me when I want to do some landscape photography to challenge myself to just one focal range to help me get nice and creative and get some different images, not just relying on my 70 to 200 on my 15 to 35 to punch in, zoom out. I have to actually move my feet, get creative, and get some different types of landscapes. So I've looked at the plus points, let's look at some of the negatives that come with this lens. So first off, it's cheap, so it's been made cheap. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's plastic. It's been updated with a metal mount on the back. But like I say, it is a cheap lens, so it's not going to be the most robust thing, but for about 100 quid, if you do drop it, break it, it's not going to break the bank to replace it. And trust me, I have put this lens through the ringer. I've thrown it about, I've dropped it, and touch wood, it's still going very strong. Let's just say I'm much more careful with both my RF 15 to 35 or my EF 70 to 200 because they are much more expensive. I wouldn't throw them around like I throw this thing around. So the second negative I found from using this lens over the last few years is the autofocus is quite noisy, which isn't a crazy problem for photography, but when it comes to video, it might cause an issue. So it might be worth just testing it out and seeing if that noise is really going to annoy you when shooting video. Anytime I'm using this lens for video, I'm using manual focus anyway, so it removes that issue completely. But if you're not careful, like say if you do leave it on autofocus, you will hear that motor turning to find focus, and it is quite noisy and it will be picked up by your microphone. So just keep that in mind when shooting video. It's best to use it on manual focus and not autofocus. So to wrap this video up, I think most photographers or videographers should have a 50mm lens in their bag, especially with this Canon f1.8 version, because it's so cheap, it's so small, it's light, it's versatile, and it'll just help you progress with your photo and video work. For anyone wanting to get into wedding photography, 100% get this lens. If you've just got your first DSLR camera, get this lens. You'll get more creative with the images that you shoot. And as I mentioned earlier, the low light capabilities of this thing is 100% the reason why most wedding photographers should get this lens. So to anyone leaning towards shooting more video, again, perfect lens. I use it for shooting B-roll or in low light situations in gyms. I'll bang this lens on to get a bit more light into the sensor and to make sure I capture that focus perfectly for what I'm recording. And for anyone wanting to get into more street photography, 1000,000,000% get this lens. Like I said before, you're not going to stand out with this lens on your DSLR camera. You can get exploring the urban landscapes and get some great shots. Or if you're someone who doesn't want to pay out thousands and thousands of pounds or dollars on the EF and now RF 1.2 version of this lens, then get this. It will not let you down. Get a couple of them as backup. If you drop it, it's not a big deal. 100 quid, away you go. Get another one. And I know for some people £100 is a lot, but in photography terms, that is not a lot for a lens that will produce some fantastic results. So let me know in the comments below if you've got this lens, how you found it, any issues that you found. And if you like this video, hit that like button, that'd be awesome. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.